Right, today I got up at 3 AM to come to Avebury to see the sunrise over the standing stones, which I can assure you is happening somewhere behind that bank of cloud. This is England after all. So this is Avebury Ring, sometimes referred to as Stonehenge's sister. It's an absolutely massive henge. It's the largest henge in Britain, and many people say the entire world. Its diameter is 350 metres, its circumference almost a kilometre. The stones are massive, and crucially, when comparing to Stonehenge, you can go up to these stones and lovingly stroke them and say, it's okay, it's okay. What this henge really demonstrates is the surplus amount of food and manpower available to the ancient Britons between 4,000 before present and 3,500 before present. The upland areas of the Salisbury Plain were massively fertile for ancient Britons. The land was relatively easy to clear, perfect for hardy grain crops, and created large amounts of excess food that could be spent on constructing huge monuments like this. It's also been theorized that there was a religious reformation sweeping Britain at this time, because that period is when many of our ancient Neolithic monuments date. It may not have just been that it was the first time that men had the resources to build giant monuments like this, but it may also have been the first time that they had a large-scale, organized religion that demanded sites like this. This stone is honestly the size of my car. I don't think I can get a way of showing it to scale. It's huge. While these stones may seem chaotic and natural, don't make the assumption that the ancient people who put them up lacked the ability to carve them into specific shapes. This was the same time that Stonehenge was being created, with its very clear, sharp geometric lines. We also know that some of these stones are very finely polished with hand axes, so there was a care put into these particular forms that means that they definitely were deliberate. Whether they were chosen for their abstract beauty, or whether the original rough forms had a religious significance, that maybe they liked the natural look of the rock as a religious thing, something like a gift from the gods. We don't know, but we do know that they had the ability to make these into whatever shape they wanted and chose to leave them in a comparatively natural state. There were originally 98 of these stones, or so it is estimated, and they are all absolutely gigantic. This one is almost 1.5 times my height and many times my width. It's staggering in size, and it's a relatively ordinary sized stone. There's another one there that's even taller. The size of this ring is so massive that later on a village was built inside it. It really cannot be overstated how large this henge is, and the stones are just monumental. Like, this one that I'm walking towards now is legitimately, I think, twice my height. They are big stones. Just coming here without knowing the history is incredibly exciting to see what was done thousands of years ago by men, probably even without beasts of burden, just men, materials, and time. As I come up onto the top of one of the extended ditches, you can see just how large the ring is. Comes round there, around here, around and around. It goes down there, and that's just half of it. Beyond the houses are another half of this massive monument. It is truly remarkable that men built this with essentially their bare hands, stone tools, rope and wood. That was all they had to find these huge stones and then place them, each one weighing tens of tons. Astounding work. The significance of the shapes has also been hotly debated, but in many ways we can never know. There aren't enough clues to say with any kind of certainty what the significance is. But one of the leading theories is that the squat, fat ones represent women, the tall, thin ones represent men, and they're in a roughly alternating order. Personally, I have no idea. I don't think there is enough evidence to suggest that, but I'm not a professional archaeologist, so there we go. By the Iron Age, this site was abandoned. Men had forgotten its religious significance and viewed it as simply a curiosity, an interesting part of the landscape. The Romans did almost nothing with it, other than note its existence. They did heavily police the area because sites like this were associated with the Druidic faith, which the Romans had very negative views on, thinking that they sacrificed people and hated Rome, which, considering that we have the only Roman evidence to go on, we have to assume that they did. Eventually the Saxons arrived and tried to take over southern Britain, and, as you can tell as I'm speaking English, they succeeded. And this site, it has been theorised to have been turned into a fort by the ancient Britons, as one of its early Saxons' name was, and I'm going to butcher the pronunciation, Veladic, which means Welsh or British fort or ditch. So it's possible that this was again significant for the Britons and may have been why the West Country held out longer than the East, as this controls one of the major country roads, the A4. If you hold this site, you control that road. So that may have been why it took a little bit longer to conquer the West Country. When you get to the medieval period, you have, unfortunately, an age of superstition and fear, and the stones at Avebury became known as the Devil's Brands, and it was assumed that the devil and witches came out to play around the stones in the dead of night. Medieval people tried to destroy the stones. They broke them down, they tried to burn them in huge kilns, and none of it worked. They are too big to destroy. Many of them were buried, but even then they couldn't get rid of all of them. Some of them were dragged off to become houses, but they couldn't get rid of all of them. There were 98 massive stones, each weighing tens of tons. So for the people of the Middle Ages, they couldn't undo what people had done 1,000, 2,000 years before them. Eventually, in the 16th, 17th, 18th century, they were rediscovered as an archaeological curiosity, similar to Stonehenge. Many of the stones were rewrited. Later archaeologists found the holes that showed where the original stones were able to put some of the stones back where they could find them, and where they couldn't find the original stones because they'd been quarried, they'd become houses, etc., they put in concrete markers so that we can see everywhere that there was a stone. Down there amongst the trees is Avebury Ring, but Avebury Ring is not the only important part of the Avebury area. This entire region was a site of massive religious significance throughout the Neolithic period, and I'm currently standing in what's known as the Avenue. About a mile of walkway with standing stones either side, many of them rediscovered and righted, and many of them unfortunately lost forever and replaced with concrete posts. These are again very tall stones, and the purpose of the avenue is something we can only speculate at. It could have been a religious procession, it could have been a statement of power, it could have been like a pilgrimage site, pilgrims walking up the avenue to the religious centre. In the same way, in a cathedral, they would have a specific entrance to come in and to proceed to the saint's relics or to the altar. But we can never know. There is no evidence to what its real purpose is. We can only speculate. And now for the question everyone asks about Stonehenges. What were they used for? We don't know. We really don't. There's some evidence of sacrifice, but not enough for it to be a regular sacrificial site. There's some religious significance to it, certainly, but we don't know what. It's probably not an astrological clock, as some people suggest Stonehenge is. It's probably not a palatial court, as some people have suggested it is, a sort of a king's palace in the days when they couldn't build much more than a hut. We don't know. And we will probably never know, not unless someone comes along and invents time travel for us. It is all our best guess. And our best guess is based on, unfortunately, very little evidence. You have to remember that Stone Age peoples only had Stone Age tools. They had no known writing system. All of their wood and leather tools will have rotted away by now unless they were lucky enough to throw them into a peat bog. It's very difficult to determine how advanced they were as a civilization, as a culture. But we do know that they left us an absolutely staggering monument. I will just say, if you hate crowds, come at the crack of dawn.